So welcome, 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 our good colleague Wayne. We so appreciate your consistent leadership and solidarity. And as always at Setsi, we begin all things by giving thanks to the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So Wayne, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and share a bit about your remarkable work.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for this opportunity to meet yourself and your audience, some amazing people. My journey in life was that of a clinical psychologist. That was the path that I was on, but getting to that path was kind of interesting because I was kind of one of those students at school that never really saw school as important. It didn't meet the way I learned. I think I graduated high school in Ontario. I think I had a 45% average. They just kind of kicked me out and hoped for the best. And then when I was 27, I went back to school. I thought, hey, I think I can learn. And I went back to school and I wrote the entrance exam in the university and I didn't make it. I got a 10 out of 100. And they said, you're not our type of person. So, but there was a professor there who came alongside, and I think this was the key. This was the turning in my thinking, was he said, wait, I actually think you can learn. You have some ideas. You just don't know how to read and write. You don't know how to express it. You don't know how to get out there. And so he spent 6 months with me teaching me the English language. And then I went back to school for the next 15 years and got a 4.0 into my Ph.D. That really shaped my thinking because, the traditional model of health for me was, in the idea of, the clinical practice is that when we meet people, we always tend to start with what's wrong with them as our pathway forward. And what this professor taught me, start with what's right about a person. Hear their story, hear their aspirations, and how do you come alongside and discover actually the innate strengths they actually have, they just don't realize it, and then give expression for it. And so my pathway forward over the last 30 years has really been about how do we build people, organizations from the inside out, so that at the end of the day, they start to realize that they're quite capable of creating success, and that they learn to be adaptive. They learn to navigate challenges, and they see challenges not as something that is something to avoid, but actually that's where they're going to learn. Because when you step out of your comfort zone, you actually start exploring things you've never done before. And so the model that we created was really more about how do we teach people to be resilient? How do we help them to learn what skills they need in order to be competent? Create that confidence, that self-agency, that sense of, no matter what comes my way, I'm good with who I am. I like what I'm doing. And I know that no matter what comes my way, whether it's a growth opportunity or a challenge, I'm going to discover a greater level of potential in who I am. And so I've been able to translate that model into how education engages students or corporations work with their employees, because in those settings, I think the greatest asset that an education division or an organization have is their staff. It's the teachers. It's your people on the front line doing the work that your vision of your organization has. And so therefore, how do we help them to be resilient and competent, but to align their vision with your vision? And because they're oftentimes the one who has the relationship with the students, right? They're the ones who have the relationship with your customers, or they're the ones who are in community and have relationship with the grassroots people in the community. And it's at that level that we actually see transformation. But I think it starts with, how come you're doing this? Don't you realize that's going to be harmful? To, that was an interesting choice. I would never have thought of that. Why was it important to you? It's about being curious. It's about being reflective. And it's more about facilitating a process, building people from the inside out, as opposed to telling people what they should do, and therefore robbing them of their sense of agency, robbing them of their sense of empowerment. Because what I found in my clinical practice is that when I worked with people, if I told them what to do, I created dependency. If I invited them into being part of the solution, I empowered them. And therefore, they parented their children differently. They worked in their relationships differently. They chose different paths in their community because they saw it as meaningful. They saw it as purposeful. Therefore, it was their journey, not my telling them what it should look like.
That's incredible. What a journey and what a message. Thank you so much for your leadership. And I love the concepts that one of my elders shared with me years ago. That's just that asset-based approach
Right.
to relationship cultivation and stewardship, as opposed to the deficit-based framework that a lot of
Yeah.
times is so prevalent and and dominance in so many instances within so many institutions and structures. So once again,
Yeah.
I really appreciate you. It's a perfect segue to my next question. What's inspiring you right now? What has you curious, or what's keeping you up at nights?
What inspires me, and it's sort of the why of my life, is when I see light bulbs going on, when I get to work with groups or individuals and they go, oh, we could do it this way. Oh, I didn't realize that we could, and it's those light bulbs, those aha moments when people start to realize that, hey, there is potential. There is a way through this. And it's not because I told them what it was, but because they started to connect the dots. That's what inspires me. That's my life passion right now and it has been for 30 years. It's about empowering others to realize their own potential, and therefore they have a transformative influence in their environment that I would never have an influence on. What keeps me up at night is the next idea that I have, and how am I going to get there? uh, People have been asking me, Wayne, aren't you retired yet? And I says, no, this is my life passion. I'll never die or retire. I'll be doing this to the day the Lord takes me home concept. And because it's about people, it's about relationships, it's about building a fabric of where people can actually flourish. And it doesn't mean that we take away all the pain and angst, but rather the pain and anxiety sometimes are indicators of something different. And they actually are part of our life, right? And that's why I oftentimes stray a little bit away from the traditional strengths model, because they sort of say, if you find out what you're good at, then you should focus there. And I get that. It's sort of like if you're a golfer, you got a great drive, but that's all you do. No, you got to learn how to get out of the sand trap once in a while, or what to putt on the green. And so my belief is that, yeah, learn what you do well and learn to stretch that into new environments, but learn what you don't know by going into things you've never done before, the challenges, because that's actually where you discover new things about yourself, new strengths. And ideally, life is about, what did I try yesterday as I stepped out of my comfort zone that I'm using today? And as I step out of my comfort zone today, I'm going to use that for tomorrow. And it's that continuous journey of learning from the ebbs and flow of life.
Indeed, sir. I couldn't agree more. So my next question, what challenges and barriers do you face in your work? And what are some of the approaches you and your colleagues are taking to overcome some of these challenges and barriers?
If I think about the different domains that I work in, oftentimes it's not the individuals, it's not the students, it's not the teachers, and sometimes it's a bit more of the structure of how those organizations work or how they function. Probably the biggest pushback I've ever had is in the medical model when it comes to addictions treatment, community healthcare, because it's very much based on that idea that if we can figure out what's wrong, we can find a solution to it, and therefore we'll prescribe it. And that's a well-entrenched model. And, even look at funding grants and funding opportunities. It's very much based on, how I call it how messed up we are. The more messed up we can tell the story, the greater the probability is we'll get funding. And I see that in First Nations communities, and I work with a lot of them across Canada. And it's amazing how they have to say, well, we had this many suicides this year, or this is the level of addictions in our community, before anybody pays attention to it. And yet when I go into the communities, I also say, yeah, but look at this. You're doing some amazing stuff here. There's a lot of strengths. Why can't we get funded on what you're doing right and build that and get better at it? Which we know in the research oftentimes then starts to resolve a lot of the other issues that are more crisis oriented. Because when people start to experience success, they want more of it. And they'll have a comparison now. And this gets into the neuroscience of how our brains work and our biology. It creates the right hormones. It creates different pathways in our neural pathways in our brain. And until you have experiences that you gravitate to and you realize this is a good thing, then you have something to compare to what the old way was. And therefore, you can make a choice. But if you never have that comparison, you'll always default back to your old patterns of coping. And it's not because you're choosing to mess up your life. It's just that you're just trying to meet a need. And you don't know what the skill and strength is you need in order to meet that need in a positive way, for whatever reason, your lived experience, your culture, your school dynamics, whatever the case might be. So my belief is that if we want to help people, let's find out the need they're trying to meet, but then let's give them the skill and the strength to know how to meet it in a positive way, and the behavior looks after itself.
Indeed. Thank you so much for all that context. And once again, I couldn't agree more in terms of some of the ways that folks have to amplify deficits to be resourced and supported, as opposed to, once again, being able to speak to some of the strengths. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate your candor and your transparency. My next question is, do you have a set of key priorities right now in your work that you'd like to share with our listeners and our viewers?
Yeah. I believe the goal of individuals, organizations, community is to flourish. I think that's the goal. And so what does it take for us to then start experiencing that? Because it's not a overnight, it's not a miracle that happens just instantaneously. It's always a growth process of people evolving their experiences. The other thing is I believe you need to focus on what I think is it's always relational. People develop who they are in the context of those around them. And therefore, that idea of, people connecting with others, even as professionals working with others. I always tell my clients when I'm working with them is that what I think about you doesn't really matter. What you think about yourself is everything. And therefore, my job is to listen, to be curious, to understand what's important to you. And my role here is not to fix you, it's to facilitate opportunities for you to grow your potential. I believe that model has application for parenting, for our own personal growth, our organization. So when I work with organizations, I challenge the leadership around, are you creating a culture where people can realize their potential? Or are you just telling them what to do because you think that mandate? And what is your mandate? So if your staff are flourishing, your vision for what your outcomes are probably tend to look after themselves. And this is an example. I worked with a school in a school district, and these were kids that have dropped out of school. So they were ages 18 to 25 range. And the program had about 180 students, and we had a 15% success rate of kids going on, getting their high school degree and going on to post-secondary or employment. So what I did is I focused not on the students, but on the teachers. How do you have relationship? How do you ask different questions? How do you invite kids into connecting the dots to why learning would be important to their aspirations? What are their strengths that they bring because they're still in the game and something didn't take them out. So they got some amazing strengths. 4 years later, we had an 85% success rate of those kids graduating. And when we did our exit interviews, every one of them said it was because I had a teacher that believed in me. That was it. That was a safe relationship that they could go into and talk, that the person wasn't judging them, that they were always encouraging them. They were always sort of saying, yeah, but you just about got it right. And we're just going to add this and you're going to get it right. So it wasn't black and white. It was very much a relational, progressive, clear expectations. But every child, every student knew that this was a safe place, that they could trust the teachers, and they knew they were going to be respected every step of the way.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So my second last question, what is your ultimate goal and what does success look like to you and your colleagues?
Yeah, the world's a big picture. I think I kind of work every day within the realm that I have an influence, knowing that there's going to be a synergetic effect as we work with this. So for example, I work with First Nation schools and we're now creating greater graduation rates. We're creating greater employment rates. Other schools are now looking at it and saying, what are you doing? How come you're getting those results? So it has a synergetic effect. So my ultimate goal is that I'm consistent in who I am and how I practice with people, knowing that there's if we believe in the potential of people, that we see them, that they have the ability to take ownership of their lives, to create success. And we take more of a servant attitude of coming alongside instead of telling them what to do every step of the way. So what I'm hoping is that I'm an example to others about what that could look like in their own domains. It's not that I have all the answers, because I'm on my own journey. I wished I would have known I did today 20 years ago. but it never ceases to amaze me, the spark that comes up in people's lives when the people around them or the organization they work for changes their language to, you're important to us, you're important to our success. How can we help you to realize your own dreams, and we can work together for the dreams of our larger vision? And that to me is kind of a template for community. You know, I've worked with so many organizations where we worked with challenging situations, and every time that person would have to retell their story to a new organization. And I was saying, why can't we come together as organizations and take a strength-based approach? Because you all do different things differently, but they're all amazing. But maybe the uniqueness of your clients may need one or two of the different organizations. And how could you come together and work together? So that's that idea of community. How do we create a community that's about believing in its members and giving members the permission to sort of experience success, knowing that eventually they're going to become the fabric of your community going forward. Maybe a mother parenting a child. It might be working in an environment. It might be the next new leader, the mayor of your city. I don't know. But let's start them on that pathway where they actually have this amazing grace and courage to embrace life, take on the challenges, and learn what potential they have. Because if they know what they're good at and their strengths, they're going to change the world around them.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you. Thank you. So my last question, do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action for our listeners and our viewers?
Well, my wife has always told me that don't be telling people what to do, Wayne. So my call to action for people is to sort of look inside and where are you at on your own personal journey? What's your sense of purpose? Why do you do what you do? And what is it that was in your past, if you reflect, who were the people in your life that were the most transformational influence in your life? And I can guarantee you, it's going to be people who connected with you, created safety, believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself, encouraged you when you didn't think it was possible. It's going to be those individuals that transformed your life. So why wouldn't we do the same thing for the people around us? Because that's the magic. That's the key. I believe everybody has the ability to do amazing things. We just need to unlock it with a relational approach that actually invites them into the journey so that it's collaborative. It's power with, not power over. And then people will thrive. And so my invitation is that for anybody who might be listening, the journey of flourishing doesn't start with the people around you. It starts with you. You can't give away anything that you're not experiencing. So it's a personal journey for me. I can name all the theories out there, appreciation choir, positive psychology, all those different things. But my ability to practice starts because I'm living it. And therefore, I have insight to ask the different questions, to be able to talk about my own journey in light of the journey invited into, whether it's an organization, a community. So I tend to listen 85% of the time, maybe 15% of the time it's asking questions. And, but it's, I now have a real deep sense of my professional practice and my personal values are the same. So when I go to bed at night, I feel okay. It was a tough day, but I did good work concept. And so, because we know that actually that disconnect or the dissonance between work and our personal values, if it gets too far apart, that's what causes stress. That's what causes burnout. That's what causes people to leave their occupations. And so aligning your personal values with your professional practice, it's a purposeful journey. It's just not something that wishful thinking gets you to.
Indeed, indeed. Earlier today, right before this interview, my 18-year-old son was telling my wife, Papa's never going to retire, just so you know. And I think it's funny when you mention what your wife tells you. I think that any married man, I've been married for 20 years, any married man could say, we probably have a textbook that we can write on what our wife has told us. So I appreciate your candor, your transparency, and your sheer visionary leadership, sir, and all the work that you're doing on behalf of so many. And yeah, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful. So as always at Setsi, we close the way we began this conversation's interview by giving thanks to the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts, whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action, Wayne?
Well, I just want to thank you for the privilege of sort of entering your realm and being part of what you do, because I know there's a real synergy of values. So thank you very much for that privilege. It's been amazing.
Indeed. Thank you so much, sir.